Kim, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm stoked for this. So we met through our mutual friend, Aaron Abke. So shout out to Aaron for introducing us.
Yes.
Yeah, stoked to have you. Let's start with your background first and just introducing yourself to my audience.
So I'm a physician and I was conventionally trained. I trained at Emory University. I did emergency medicine, which is like trauma, critical care. It was one of the premier level 1 trauma centers in the country. So for that kind of medicine, like great place to train. But my history before that was more about the osteopathic model, like how the mind and body are connected, how the body heals itself.
You're a doctor of osteopathy, right?
Yes,
okay.
I'm a DO and then did my board certification in ER, which is kind of like two opposite worlds in a way. Most of osteopathic medicine's been kind of like swallowed up into the...
That's what I was going to say. Like my perception of it from the outside, and obviously that's skewed because I'm not an osteopath myself, but it almost looks like MDs and DOs are virtually the same thing nowadays with some minimal differences in training.
Because of a political move of you can't control people if they're allowed to think for themselves and do their own thing. So, hey, let's just like welcome them to our club and have them play by our rules, which back in the 60s, I think it was like 65% of the DOs just got eaten up by the MDs and converted. But I was fortunate enough that it was still being taught in the training that you would truly learn what healing was really about in medical school. So I had like an extra year of a fellowship training that I was able to do. People that I was working with at the time who are like true osteopaths, like telepathically communicating across the room, knowing what's going on in a body, even if they didn't have their hands on there. The first time I got exposed to that, I went to interview for medical school and I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't know we could do this. I didn't know this was possible. This is 100% what I'm doing. If I don't get into school this year, I'm applying to one place and this is it. So I knew that's what I was here to do. You know, back before that, I had like a really powerful awakening experience when I was young, telepathic, like able to hear. It was kind of a disturbing level of telepathically hearing, sensing everything going on. But I did have these huge downloads of awareness of, I guess you could say like the quantum field, and that our thoughts are creating our reality and that we're interacting with everything around us and it's actually responding to us, to our thoughts.
How old were you when this happened?
16.
You're 16. Wow. And did you tell your parents, friends, anything like this?
So I ended up, we were out at a movie theater and it was kind of like a ayahuasca-like experience.
Wow.
Very, like I wouldn't have known those words, but
was
now,
there anything that initiated it?
Yeah, so we had used marijuana.
Ah, okay.
And I was not used to any of that or adept. I'm a super chemical sensitive person. And I don't know what it really happened. You can have a whole bunch of theories, but it awakened like multiple dimensions of my already present intuition and, you know, ability to be pretty telepathic and empathic, like sensing people's energies, feeling their emotions. But this was like an order of magnitude beyond that. And it, you know, changed me forever. So yeah, people knew because I ended up, you know, they thought I was psychotic and I had a seizure. You know, it was like there was so much activity in my brain, I didn't have the capacitance to kind of handle that higher frequency information. So anyway, during that experience, knew I was here to be a physician, in the system physician, and knew I was here to bring this perspective to medicine so that we as humanity would begin to understand what disease really is and how to truly assist healing instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it.
Awesome. So you had that initial experience with marijuana, which doesn't surprise me at all, especially knowing that, and I'm not saying that you're old by any means, it's just that marijuana then relative to now is completely different in the way that it's processed, especially as it's becoming more legalized. The unfortunate thing about legalization is that the people who are cultivating that marijuana are putting their intention, and their intention is for profit. And then it's also that it's sprayed with glyphosate and all these other things. And that's ultimately what people are smoking. It's taken out the spirit of the plant versus the marijuana that I presume you likely had was completely different at that point in time. So it doesn't surprise me that it can initiate those experiences. And I've had Ryan Sprague on my podcast who grows marijuana in a very intentional way. And he's talked about this psychedelic capacity inherent to marijuana that is now virtually unheard of and unfound in most modern forms and modern strains. But previously, that's what marijuana was known for, this sort of psychedelic effect that it used to have on people. Yeah.
Well, it was a shock for me. And it was very disturbing, destabilizing experience, because you have this foundation of reality that's like, we're physical, we're separate, here's how we go about things. And it completely dissolved that, where, like we were talking about the telepathy tapes, and these kids are aware of high dimensional beings and messages and that guidance. So it was like that at a very significant level all at once. But here I am, in Boston and like a Catholic family, and I didn't have a single person in my life that had any context to understand anything about what I was experiencing. So after, being treated for like mental, I was on antidepressant, anti-anxiety, I was having panic attacks.
That's how far it went afterwards because of this.
For years it was like, it would kind of cyclically and have these episodes with, I don't know if it was because the auric field was so open in this like higher perception, but it would kind of hit all at once, and I'd have, I don't know, more and more of a accessibility to higher consciousness. But it took maybe over a decade to actually integrate that in a way where I kind of understood it, or could, it's almost like if you got the really, really loud like frequency, and then you got to like dial it in the right way to hear and to be able to like functionally work with that. And that was when these like gifts were not like a curse. It was like, oh, okay, I can use this in a helpful way beyond just being able to hear and know people, there's a whole host of emotions and feelings and thoughts that person's having, but why are they nodding and smiling? Like I would have the awareness of what they were actually experiencing, what they actually meant behind their words. And then like the cover up of like, no, it's this way. And I'm doing this because blah, blah, blah. And I thought people were lying until I took a long time to kind of see, oh, they're disconnected. They have no idea what's happening in their own body, in their own system, in their own thoughts, in their own emotion. And I do. So you kind of at first think, I must be wrong. I don't know what I must be crazy. But yeah, like after years of reading spiritual books, I thought like, I'm the only one here, but someone else is reading this book. So like someone in the world, maybe someday we'll connect. Taught myself, learned from my own body to breathe a certain way that would not go into a panic attack, and literally cured myself from a very, very severe panic disorder, right? Because I couldn't take any of the medications. Had to get
that's what I was going to ask, because you were put on SSRIs, I presume, right? Okay. So did you
tricyclics, like this was a long time ago. Wow. Okay. So it was like disipramine, stuff they would never use now.
Wow. But you didn't do any like shock therapy or anything like that? No. Because what's crazy to me is that's still sometimes practiced today. Like insane. SSRIs, in my opinion, and you may have a different one, that's totally fine, are like overwhelmingly also insane. Did you find that it just numbed your experience? And then the second part to that question is, did it numb your ability to tap into what you had broken open in terms of this sort of psychic phenomena that, as people would call it?
The ability was too big for anything to actually disrupt.
Wow. Okay. So it broke you wide open. And you said you already had a little bit of a tendency towards those things, but maybe didn't have the framework to understand them.
Yeah.
And then the marijuana experience broke them wide open.
Oh, yeah. Like an order of magnitude. I think it was divine intervention, because why would that even, it took a long time to put it together, because I thought like I did this bad thing and I'm being punished, and the whole like God and demon thing from the Catholic background. Totally. So I kind of would, pray and just like say these prayers. And that was why, you go to a psychiatrist in Boston and they kind of were like, oh, she's got obsessive compulsive disorder. Totally. But it was actually what I was doing was mantra. It was the only mantra I knew was these prayers of like the Hail Mary or the Our Father, and like just to connect with some form of divinity that, as I understood it, that was soothing. It went way beyond that. As I learned from my own body, like what would actually calm my system down. It was like a lesson of mind, body, medicine from within my own being, as opposed to like you read a book and you learn it. I had to learn it from my system, because it was me and me. If I had spoken to anybody about what was happening, like I finally had to stop, because I'm like, they're going to keep locking me up. It's not safe to function that way.
Totally.
You know, you got all these like telepathy tapes and these kids coming out, but imagine if that was how many years back,
Right.
it wouldn't even really be allowed. So it was challenging. I did think maybe I'm kind of crazy, but it was like, all right, Kim, you gotta get this together. You got to take it within yourself and you got to sort this out. And then maybe someday somewhere there'll be people you can share this with or talk to about it or who knows what. And yeah, it did evolve into such a true gift to be able to see what's going on in someone's system, why they're sick, what's really behind it, 10 dimensions into like, I don't know, your father's lineage and something that happened that was like a shame or an abuse or these are all just energy. And you can feel energy or see energy or hear, you know, people can sense things when they let their electromagnetic system open. And yeah, it can be very disruptive to let all that in. So you have to learn to receive it with grace and in a way that's intelligent and useful and for a purpose, which now as a doctor, talk about a great purpose. Being able to really help people truly, truly heal by like releasing what's at the core in their system, in their DNA, in their biofield. Like these are all different. What's a biofield? These are different dimensions. And so in the conventional system where it's like your physical body, oh, let's look at your kidneys, let's look at your heart, your lungs, everything's fine. Or maybe, hey, we look at your history. What happened when you were 3? We're not looking at like your mom's grandmother's, you know, something happened in that lineage and the energy of that and how it's like in your field and how it's affecting your field. And like, hey, there's the reason why you're not clearing Lyme disease. Like that's way beyond what most doctors are able to conceive of.
Right.
So now the problem
sort of imprinting into the waters of your body and your electromagnetic field, essentially.
Yep. And the DNA.
Yep.
Everything, all of it.
Got it. So let's start at the beginning here. With mind-body medicine. That's a term that's thrown around quite a bit nowadays, and I wonder if I have to give credit for you, like for the foundation of that term then went viral. I don't know.
I could be a part of it.
You could be. You're a big piece of it,
I wouldn't be the initiator.
You wouldn't be the initiator, but you have like an institute for this specifically, right? That you founded.
Yes.
Okay. So, what is your definition of mind-body medicine?
It's really just about how the mind and body are connected, how the body has the ability to heal itself, and how our inner consciousness, thoughts, beliefs, emotions have a direct effect on the physical.
Okay. Awesome. I totally agree with that. So. The one question, or I have a lot of questions on this actually, but I know that you've mentioned on other episodes that I've heard you on and other like streams of yours about brain patterning as it relates to the mind. So the question that I'll start with, I guess, is where is the mind? Because is the mind actually in the brain, or is the mind just influencing the brain? Is the brain a receiver for the mind? I've heard a bunch of different ideas on how this works, and it ultimately stems in the root question, I think, would be, does the brain create consciousness, or does consciousness create the brain?
So whenever we're using specific words, like a word is just a concept. So it's not like I'm going to give this definition and that's universal. But what we tend to think of as the mind, which is like processing and the higher functioning thoughts, is not in the brain. It's not even local to just the body. And the biofield, you know, which we can detect 8 to 10 feet up around the body, can carry that impact of the mind, meaning the frequency, the vibration of our thoughts, our emotions, like the whole thing that makes us us, is held in that, you know, in the cells, in the biofield, your whole sphere. From my awareness, like we're all connected. And we talked about the etheric field and like, what's this field that connects everyone everywhere? The mind, you know, like thoughts, they're not your thoughts. It's like you're an antenna.
Yeah.
And so minerals and different things you put in your body can have you be an even better antenna for like higher frequency thoughts of like, I'm loved. All is well. I can find my way through this. But when they're absent or you have lots of toxicity, you're an antenna for thoughts like, I'll never make it. I might as well quit now. It'll never happen for me. And so that's why like nutrition can be helpful. The certain water that you're drinking and minerals can help you kind of evolve what you're an antenna for. So when people think of the mind and they just think like, I got to have this positive thought, all is well. It's okay. I'm going to heal. Are you actually receptive for that the frequency of that thought, right? Because that isn't just about the mental. It's like the emotional, it's the physical, it's a vibrational frequency. So I would say the mind is sort of like our own jurisdiction over our biosphere, our body, our being, and our journey, right? I have my own movie playing here, and it looks pretty good right now, but everyone has their own perception of like what's even going on. What are they seeing? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And you think you're in the same movie, but you're actually not. So I think your own mind is like your projector creating what your moment appears to be.
Could we say it's like a form of interface between the biofield and our physical being, primarily the brain?
Yes, because it gets interpreted into sight, what I see, what I feel, what I think, what I hear, all of the things that come through the senses. That's what happens in the mind is it gets physicalized, it gets transmitted into like signals that we can perceive and play with.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So on that same point, I've had a lot of talks with a variety of people on this podcast who some say it's necessary to go back and revisit past traumas and sort of extract them out of your body. Some say it's not necessary to do that. Some say it's even deeper than doing that. You have to really fundamentally heal your nervous system. But the question that I have for you with your approach is, I know there are a lot of people out there who do all the right things physically, like eat all of the right foods, then they might even be listening to what you're saying about the mineral intake in your body or the toxicity that they have in their body. And they're like, look, I've done all the things. I've done all the cleanses. I eat a very natural, like holistically oriented diet, eating only organic, spend a ton of time in nature. And yet I still seem to be stuck and physically in pain. So what is your take on what's happening? I know this is going to be a very general answer because you have to take each individual for their unique circumstances, but what do you think largely is going on with people who experience something like that?
I've seen, you have your conscious thoughts, like, what do you mean? I'm not angry. I'm not harboring anger. I'm perfectly happy. But in the unconscious system, we've like suppressed anger or fear or shame, and it's like brewing. Blood pressure gets high. You get heart disease, liver toxicity, all that. But then, in the subconscious realm, we can tap into that. And like you were pointing toward, this past trauma, do I need to revisit that trauma? Do we need to relive that? Everything that needs to be addressed, that's ready to move, referent to anything coming up in your life, whether you're at a severe disease and you're told you're going to die in 6 months, or it's like, I never can make enough money and I'm really struggling, or my marriage is suffering. Everything that is ready to move is right here, right now. You don't need to go to the past and like dig it up and try to think about it, because really like think about all the dimensions where that could be. Is it in utero? Is it another past life?
Right.
How do we do that?
Is it compound? Like, because if you really want to get to the root, how can you know with certainty, right, that you are getting to the root? Because you could say that your root trauma is this one instant at this time. Do you know that with certainty, or was that just compounding based on another previous root trauma?
It's in layers. So we can only look at what is ready to heal, to rise up and resolve right now. And I will tell you one thing, no matter what challenges are going on, that's a sign of like things bubbling to the surface, like the zit is about to pop. You're going to get to the root of whatever is coming up as the challenge right now. And there may be layers, like a year later, there may be a deeper layer that you get to. So you can only ever really work with the now. So what I have people do is like feel and sense, physically, emotionally, ground into your body, because the body will always communicate with you. And so sure, it might lead you to like, oh, there's all this fear or this shame or this like trauma. And if you bring up maybe a memory or experience from the past, it can be useful to help those emotions surface. But it's not useful in like, oh, I got to relive this or clean this up. Like you just erase the chalkboard of the past. What's here now? So sometimes an experience can help you really get into the emotions that are ready to release. But when people breathe through the emotion, move through the emotion, we do EFT tapping, your body will recalibrate in a new frequency, in a new way. Like I can be at peace, referent to that memory, trauma, emotion, thought, belief. And it will literally allow that to resolve. And the bigger thing I've seen with that is beyond the conscious, and then there's the subconscious, and then there's like the ancestral, like everything that you already came in with, everything that's in your bloodline, like everything that you're a part of resolving. And it's actually supposed to be like a gift. You have what you need in order to do that resolution, that transmutation. And when you're guided and you're just here now in the body, feeling, sensing, your body does it. Your body already knows how to clear all of that trauma.
So how do we get into our body, like past the mind and the repetitive negative thoughts and things like this? And I know for some people, even for me in my experience, when I'm like feeling really down, it sometimes can be really hard because it's almost not even a thought. It's just a feeling that feels stuck in my body. And I know I've had times in my life, I scored pretty high on the ACE score, so that can give you an indication of, the trauma that I've experienced. And it's all relative. But the point is that, especially as a male, I think even if I feel something inside of me, I'm like, I know I need to cry. It's like I need some initiatory experience to get me to cry in order to get this out, The
more you're present and physically dropped in, sensing the physical body, the more you will become present to the emotions in a way that lets them release. So it is so easy. It's so simple. And the more I'll bring people to feel and sense the body, feel your bum on the seat, even just kind of like rubbing your thighs and getting your awareness, because where you sensation goes is where your energy is going to flow. So you just kind of like touch your body, you can move your body, shake your body, bring sensation into the physical body. Your body only lives in the now, and that will then allow the opening of the emotional body. When we use tapping, what we're doing is we're neutralizing the electromagnetic channels and letting the brain get clear information. So the brain maybe is like processing old information. Oh, I hope Alec likes me. I hope I'm saying a good job. And, you're in this alternate reality of your thoughts or what you hope happens, versus like, oh, it's okay to be here right now. And you get your brain on the channel of what's actually happening. So now you're here, you'll feel things. We just had that like telepathic moment before we started where there's communication happening and I can be aware of it rather than disconnecting from my body and I'm oblivious to it and oblivious to not only what's happening with this other person, but what's happening in my own body. What am I actually feeling right now? Then we're just a talking head saying the program.
So it's almost a way of orienting your mind towards the present moment.
Yeah, especially when we're uncomfortable, like you were saying, oh, I got to move this. I want to let this go. You can't. You can only go into it more willingly. So softening the body, like physically softening, that will shift the nervous system from like sympathetic fight or flight, which is disconnection from the now and the emotions, into parasympathetic, restore, rest, and digest, that relaxation response. And we see how that immediately shifts the bioelectric field, like instantaneously, and then secondarily changes your chemistry. So like cortisol comes down, oxytocin goes up, dopamine. You're like, oh, I'm good. I feel good. Now you're on a whole different frequency of what your body can do.
Another thing that I wanted to discuss too is, and I think this is a misconception that I'm about to say that a lot of people latch onto, that if you just change your thoughts, just think positively, that is enough if you do that repetitively to initiate healing. Why is that a big misconception?
I had a lot of trouble with that because a lot of the work in the mind-body space is in that direction. So you think of that's like the masculine direction. Just go where you want to be. Put your attention where you want it to be in a higher frequency. And it's great. That is valuable. But you want to also and equally embody the feminine, which is being where you are right now with greater willingness. So for example, like, I'm so stressed, or I feel really bad about this. No, it's all good. And that's not going to be accessible. You've also got to like sit in the call it shit, but it's actually just energy. And until you're willing to sit with it, what you resist persists. Now you got all those emotions way packed under here and you're like, I'm managing my positive. It's only a matter of time until that collapses because you're not going to have enough energy to sustain it. When you open to the emotion, like, all right, I'm willing to feel as shitty as I feel, or the hopelessness of this disease, or the fear of like, I'm told I only have a few months to live, or like everything that comes up in that realm. What if I can just for 5 minutes a day or 5 breaths a few times a day. I'm just going to feel everything I feel with no resistance and welcome these sensations, right? Emotions are energy in motion. It's ultimately a sensation. It's ultimately an experience. And usually when there's no resistance, that experience can move through in like 12 seconds. So you don't have to repress 40 years of anger or shame. You could have 12 seconds and or grief, let me let that resolve. As deep as it is, that grief will open you to greater capacitance for love. So in the work I've done, I found the masculine, right? Overcome it, be positive, and the feminine, which is like, be in it exactly as it is, but welcome it, to be equally essential. And sort of like I would say the magical potion to truly allow the deepest level of healing.
I love that so much. I think that's so important to say too. The question that I have on the flip side of that is that there's a lot of people who I think can get stuck in the feminine side of that, where they're perpetually ripping the Band-Aid off. So how do we know when we've truly felt something to its completion?
So you can't do it as a way to get something. I'm going to keep feeling all this sadness, and then I'm going to feel more free as a result. It's like you can only actually feel what's here. So don't try to go and feel into your fear so then you can feel better. Or let me just process my grief. Like, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
All you can ever do is be more fully here.
Okay, so let me reiterate that in a different way to make sense of it, to make sure I got that. Yeah. What you're essentially saying is, once you sort of latch onto this idea that I have grief and focus on that, it's like you are unwittingly perpetuating more grief rather than, irrespective of what the emotion is, rather than even naming it maybe you need to name it at some point in time. It's just about feeling whatever is present right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Because people will say to me, oh, so if I feel the fear, then I'll heal. Well, in this 10 seconds, that's what appears to be the path, but that doesn't mean it's a rule. So you got to keep trying to go into your fear or grief, or don't make a rule out of anything other than be here now, right? That the now will set you free, this moment, entering the moment. And the truth about it is that low frequency of grief or fear or anger is only dissolved by your willing presence. So as soon as you're 2% more willing to sit with that level of depth of pain or grief, you are already in a higher frequency. You're already in greater grace. And even though it still might feel like shit, you're already beginning the healing.
I love that. So you're really big on EFT. I've done EFT quite a bit. Yeah. I've also done EMDR. I've also done like meditative reparenting. I've also done a lot of subconscious stuff. I've done a lot of like somatic body release type stuff. What I've come to is that those are all useful tools unique to the individual to ultimately just get you to feel. That's it. Like the main thing we're trying to get to is just feeling. And I had a very cathartic, direct experience of that when I did a 15-day water fast, where you're eliminating the noise in your life, so to speak, and it's just you and God, because I did it in a very intentional way, mostly out in nature in Colorado. And was doing that for 15 days. Yeah, you love Colorado. I know you do. Exactly. But in that experience, I learned that some of these things that I felt were too scary previously to look into had no power over me if I was just willing to feel them. It's just feeling them. That's it. Just sitting and being with them. So when it comes to things like EFT, EMDR, how do we ensure that we're not using them as a crutch or avoidance tool to healing versus using them to get deeper into ourselves to stimulate real feeling?
Don't use them to get something. Use them to love yourself more fully. That's the number one. When I start my Embracing Health group, when we work with a new group, the biggest thing in that kickoff call is like, don't do this work as a way to get somewhere, as a way to make the problem go away. Use this as a way to love yourself more fully, or as a way to open the body to that nurturance. If that's all you do, the body will heal 100% of the time. And I don't care what diagnosis someone has, when you begin that path, sometimes healing your life may be over and you go into a death, but it's like some unbelievable peaceful death with like amazing realizations first. You cannot control how this goes, how many years you're going to be around, how wealthy and happy and energized you get to be. That's all a result of opening the system. So when you're willing to like open your system to love, to peace, to harmony, to I'm unconditionally willing to let life in and feel life. Yeah, you're going to feel good. You're going to feel lighter. You're going to feel exhilarated. And yeah, for the most part, your body's going to reverse any inflammatory disease process we've ever heard of in the medical textbooks. But you can't be attached to the outcome. So you can't do EFT. Oh, I got to get my energy back, or I got to make this cancer go away. You've got to actually let go of that agenda for the more primary intention, which is to embody love.
So that should be the deepest intention in your experience with this.
Yes. And when you do the EFT, to love your body, even just 2%, because you're like, I'm in so much pain. How can I love it? I'm willing to open even just a little to let this experience in. That's when true healing happens. Yeah.
So it's releasing what is present right now. This is a tool to help release what is present right now in order to come into more love, because love just is.
Yeah. And it's to release the resistance to what is present right now, right?
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you have direct personal experience with this. We sort of jumped ahead and I kind of did that intentionally. So as you had this initial experience that sort of opened you up and you're like, holy shit, I can read other people's thoughts. This is a little crazy for me. People around you, because they didn't have the tools to cope or deal with that, didn't have the wherewithal to understand things like telepathy tapes and these types of conversations were like, what the hell? You're possessed or something like this, or you're going crazy. So you got on psych drugs, but then you found your way to becoming a doctor of osteopathy. And you had this understanding in the back of your mind and started employing it in your practice. But then you yourself got sick. And sorry, I just summarized your story for you.
Thank you. There you have it.
Was that accurate too?
Pretty much.
Okay. So you yourself got sick. And what did that look like helping to resolve that disease? I guess first, what were you diagnosed with?
Well, I ended up getting diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder that I think they kind of made it up, right? It's like,
I think pretty much all of them are just made up ways of explaining. I am of the opinion that it is, depending on the individual's unique constitution, both physical toxicity that is stuck, but primarily perpetual emotions, stress, trauma, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because the emotions will physicalize into inflammation and degeneration. And so I was diagnosed with late onset juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, but they also said it was late onset juvenile rheumatoid. There was like some inflammatory condition because it wasn't just the joints. Yeah. Anyway, I had known a lot and I tried to heal myself and doing just what we just talked about. I gotta use my thoughts. Mind over matter. How to get better? I'm gonna overcome this unrelenting fatigue, and I'm gonna power over this severe, unbelievable pain, and kind of almost ignore it. So of course, like that gets worse because of what you resist persists, and the tension of like overcome. And I'd studied a lot of Tony Robbins, and I love Tony's work.
Has its place.
It absolutely had its place. But then there was a limitation to it where that like masculine, positive overcoming was very suppressive in my system. So after getting the diagnosis, which was with this like Harvard trained doctor, I'd seen about maybe 10 doctors, maybe more, because I was in medical school. So you got all these doctors like every day. And I'd ask this one and I'd ask that one. You know, you're just like seeking. I felt so hopeless and powerless. But it just got more convoluted as we went. So finally got this diagnosis and they, injected me with all these different allergens and, oh, you have these allergies and here's what you got. But I kind of knew better. And I thought, well, why is my body reacting to those allergens? Why is my body inflamed? What's happening in my body that's creating this reaction against the environment, even though the environment is not actually harmful? And that's when, like, after that diagnosis, you'll be on all these medications, your whole lifestyle is going to change. I didn't know if I would be able to complete medical school. I had sort of like a come to Jesus talk with my body where I actually listened. Like, okay, body, what do you have for me? Like, erase the chalkboard of all this BS I'm trying to do. What's actually going on? What do I need to see? And I think it was the first time I actually got receptive. Because if your body's always talking to you, but you're like, what are they saying? What do I need to do? What's wrong with me? I had to change the channel. all right, what's right about this? I'm not getting. And what I got like immediately was the awareness of like, Kim, you don't have to run so hard. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to fight your life, and you don't have to overcome failure because you're not a failure. You're a success. Let go and be who you are.
Wow. And what did that do to your symptoms?
Immediately resolved.
Immediately?
Mm-hmm. Immediately. Wow. And so was it gone for good? No. It was quick though, because it would creep back in.
When would it creep back in?
Later that day.
Okay.
And I'd do the same thing.
Okay, so it was related
immediately. Yes.
Okay, that's what I was kind of getting at.
Relationship with my body.
Wow. Okay.
And I had practiced this mind body thing. I guess enough, or I'd learned enough that, and like I said, came through that severe panic disorder and like learned to breathe my body. Like I had already established some good neural circuitry for that inner connection so that this could happen. But was it 10 years of practicing that? You know, it's not, you don't just jump in all at once and expect an instantaneous day. But yeah, it was an instantaneous day. I've seen people instantaneously heal. Yes, I have. Yeah. So when it would creep back in, it was just same thing over and over. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you. It's okay. And I would soften my body, and immediately the symptoms would release again.
Wow.
And it was within maybe a pattern of like a week or 10 days. I don't know. It was days that the whole thing completely resolved. Like I established new neural circuitry that pattern was no longer running the show.
Wow. So when I interviewed Eileen McCusick, I've interviewed her a couple of times, and if you're not familiar with her work, she's one of the leading experts in the human biofield anatomy and just studying the human biofield as it is. I've done several sessions with Eileen. She's one of my really good friends, and one of the first ones I did, though, just after that I interviewed her, because I noticed that absolutely doing a session with her and determining that, hey, Alec, did you experience this specific thing at this specific time in your childhood? She literally found it in my field, like the exact spot. I'm like,
I know.
Whoa.
Blows your mind when you first experience
blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. Especially, I mean, I was coming in incredibly skeptical, like, oh, this is just another one of but it absolutely blew my mind because she was so spot on. And it did resolve the physical symptoms that I had been dealing with related to those specific emotions that she's identified in the human biofield anatomy. I asked her, how is it that people then start accumulating or dealing with those exact same symptoms? And she said it's because of the mind. I'm paraphrasing what she said, but it's our tendency to go back into those same thought patterns. So this is both a scientific, I guess you could say, and also more metaphysical question. How does that happen? Like, what happens, whether it's in our field, whether it's in our chakra system, our brain, like, where does that come creeping back in? And then the second part to that, and I know I'm throwing a lot at you right now, does that mean that we have totally resolved it if it is still somewhat inside of our memory? You know, does that make sense?
Yes. I would say the reason things like quote unquote come back is choice. Yeah. Am I still choosing that same frequency of like the relationships I'm in, or I'll do that for you, when I really am not honoring myself in that, yes, right? Or like people pleasing, or the job I'm in, and you have this like spark, right? When you shift your consciousness, you're gonna have a lot of major things available. Like, hey, maybe we go out and do this. Oh yeah, no. I better keep it safe. And you make choices that kind of get you right back in that same energy.
That makes a lot of sense.
And your body, like I said, it's an antenna. It's going to be like an antenna for the thoughts at that frequency, the people at that frequency, and then the freaking toxins or the candida or Epstein-Barr virus that are vibrating at that frequency are fed by you being at that frequency.
So you could almost say that because of the environment you had created for yourself physically up to that point, reinserting yourself into that exact same environment is what can then trigger those exact same thought patterns to come right back in.
Yeah, reinserting yourself in that same environment and then making the same choices.
Yeah.
So you could reinsert yourself in that environment and then you're like, oh, I'm going to, we had the sprays and they shift the electromagnetic field. You're like, I'm going to do this, right? You get presented with a new opportunity. Hey, you want to come to this dinner? Or, oh my God, that's a cool career. Maybe I'll look into that. And you start following that new frequency you just got introduced to. So it's like, are you going to choose it? Yeah, here, I'm going to open your biofield. You're going to feel amazing. You're going to do a detox with like medical medium and wow, I cleaned my liver. Are you willing to live at that new frequency and make choices to create that? Or maybe you're not quite there yet.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. What's up, you guys? I'm here with Matt Maruka, the founder of Raw Optics, to talk about something that I would say the overwhelming majority of people in the holistic health community totally overlook: light and circadian rhythm health.
All of our cells contain these organelles called mitochondria. The powerhouse of the cell, they make energy, they convert food into useful chemical energy. And it turns out mitochondria are largely controlled by our circadian rhythm. Our mitochondria are more active during the day under the influence of sunlight. When the sun goes away, our mitochondria have the opportunity to rest, repair, and regenerate when we're not being active. When it gets dark, the brain releases melatonin, and melatonin goes in and actually repairs the mitochondria, repairs all the oxidative damage that happens. Now, if we're exposed to blue light from all the artificial light sources, your phone, your iPad, your computer, your TV, the lead scientist we work with, Dr. Alexander Wunsch from Germany, actually calls it light doping. So people today are sort of being light doped by their employers with artificial blue enriched lighting to increase their productivity at the expense of their health, mental health, and long-term health and well-being. And so just by being exposed to artificial light at night can actually have a massive effect on the body's rhythm, cellular repair, and overall health and function. So we designed lenses that specifically block these disruptive wavelengths of light. So that's why we created daylight lenses. They protect your eyes from the physical damage of short wavelength blue light, but also offer a bit of a protective and relaxing effect for your hormonal system as well, but not to the degree of the sunset lenses, which are designed to basically make you really tired and even kind of knock you out in the evening. So these are the two lenses we offer so that you can have protection at the right levels, in the right way, at the right time. And then sunset lenses, you wear these 2-3 hours before bed or just from the sunset until sleep so that your brain can register, okay, the sunset, it's time for me to release that melatonin naturally so I can wind down and not have to use alcohol, weed, sleeping pills, and other things that so many people unfortunately have become dependent on because we're constantly disrupting our body's release of its natural sleep hormone.
So if you want to take control of your light and optimize your biology, head to the show notes or go to rawoptics.com and use code TWF10 at checkout for 10% off. In nearly all cases with modern health systems, you're waiting months for appointments only to spend a mere 10 minutes with a doctor who quickly hands out a generic diagnosis that is likely rooted in a total misunderstanding of health and causes, and then you're offered a one-size-fits-all medication or invasive treatments with unpleasant side effects. If this sounds all too familiar, consider a different approach with the New Biology Clinic, founded by Dr. Tom Cowan, a respected natural health doctor, author, and speaker. Dr. Cowan's holistic perspective on health and wellness and a deep understanding of the true nature of health and disease sets this clinic apart. With the New Biology Clinic, it's not about quick fixes and suppressing symptoms. The practitioners take time to understand your unique story, recognizing that health is unique to the individual and that illnesses have a variety of causes, physically and metaphysically. Members of the New Biology Clinic enjoy a flat monthly fee that includes a range of valuable services like health consults as needed, practitioner-led live streams on diverse health topics, access to a members-only resource library, and multiple live group sessions every month. These sessions cover fitness, breathing integration, biofield tuning, guided meditation, EFT tapping, and much more. Unlike traditional healthcare systems that thrive on frequent visits, prescriptions, treatments, and suppressing symptoms, the New Biology Clinic's motivation is to make you healthy and keep you that way. Visit newbiologyclinic.com to learn more and use code THEWAYFORWARD for $50 off your account activation. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com to receive $150 off your account activation. Your journey to genuine healing begins here.
It's not wrong to not be there yet. Mm-hmm. There may be something you're interested in continuing to explore at the level of lack or at the level of abandonment or being alone or, until you're done with it, the solution won't appear.
Yeah.
I had, when I learned osteopathic medicine, And I got treated by this guy who was like a myofascial release guy, and went to the like annual conference my first year, and it radically changed my life because he put his hands on my body and like the fascia and the tissues, and he said, "Oh, you've got some kind of trauma that happened." And I was like, no, I don't have any trauma. Yeah, this and this and that. And it was a really emotional trauma, and there was a big impact. And I'm thinking like, I didn't have a car accident. Like, what? No. And then he said, yeah, it was about like this many years ago. And then all of a sudden my whole system just was like, shoo. I counted back, and that was when I was 13 years old. And I had this very traumatic experience where my dad, who we had like not an awesome relationship, there was like some physical abuse. And now I'm 13 years old, and it's like, F you, you're not going to mess with me. And ran into the only room in the house that locked. And I was so afraid he was going to bust the door down and come and get me. So I went out the window. I slid down and I landed from the second story.
Oh, wow.
And I broke some bones. I mean, it was horrible, horrible trauma. But the emotional component was like, it was so scary. And I did it to myself, right? Like, so I felt really awkward about that. Later saw I kind of had to do that to get the unseen be seen. He never laid a finger on me again, but it was incredibly traumatic. So he said, well, all of your pelvic organs got like shoved down in your pelvis. And so there was like depression and this heaviness, and there was really abnormal periods, like all of that. He pulled everything back out, resolved and unwound the whole thing. All of those symptoms completely resolved.
Wow. And did they ever return?
No. I had normal periods the rest of my life, never had PMS, never had any symptoms whatsoever. Never had that same chronic like heaviness of self-doubt, depression to that degree. But it really showed me like, okay, am I ready to be that person? So usually an experience like this is either preceded by a shift in consciousness, and then like the homeopathic shows up, or the person like this who helped resolve the pelvis shows up. So you're either like on a path already of your own like ascension, and then the support structures appear, or, you know, sometimes something just comes in, and then you make the choice. Yeah, I'm going to receive this. I'm going to let this be a catalyst for me.
Yeah. Wow. And it's so nuanced, and it's so unique to the individual. That's where like, even when you incorporate factors like diet, which I think play a major role as well, how much time you're spending in nature, how much trauma you've experienced in your life, there's a variety of things that are going to be unique to the individual. One question I have related to this sort of telepathy, and I guess you could say just how you do your practice, is how does what someone is dealing with, the root, show up for you? Does it show up as an insight? Do you physically see it? Do you just see it in your mind's eye? Do you feel it in your body? What is
it's a lot of ways. I hear a lot and I'll feel a lot. So different people. So it's just about our electromagnetics, how I'm letting in information, how I'm letting in intelligence or sensation. So for me, sometimes I'll see things. A lot of times I'll hear it. And then very often I just know. And there's like a ding, 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 ding. Yes, this is, and it could be something specific like, I don't know, your mother's lineage about like suppressing your femininity and, you know, picking yourself up by the bootstraps and not letting anyone know how you really feel. And you can feel that. Just like if someone says to you, you say, hey, how you doing? And they're like, I'm fine. Well, what are you sensing? It was like the tone of voice, the body language. There's a lot of information you're picking up. So like amplify that in order of magnitude, because you like study this. You learn to listen deeply. You learn to like put that hardwiring in place where your cellular and your biofield is like picking up lots of information and you're consciously registering it. That's just practice. So yes, that is how I'm able to tune in. And it happens like over a Facebook post where this one woman was posting about, I've had this tinnitus for a decade and it's like this and that, you know, the ringing in the ears, and maybe like a paragraph about it. And I immediately knew what was going on. And it wasn't like specifics about like your grandfather got a girl pregnant and she had to have an abortion and there's this shame in your lineage. Like it's just the energy of that. Wow. It's the energy of this like loathing self-suppression that matches that story and matches like the masculine, I need to be a man and clean it up. There's like a lot of subtle nuances, but it's all just energy. So do you need to look back in your family history and find out if that's specifically what happened? Like, no. And it doesn't even matter. But if you can become aware, because really awareness is the healer, of any ways where you can feel that or sense that, like self-loathing, or there's a right way to do things and I better not show what's true, you can just let your body let that go.
Do you find that there's archetypes within that? Meaning that, like, if someone, let's say, is having severe liver issues, it typically relates back to a certain type of emotional trauma?
Yes, but it would be an oversimplification.
Okay.
To kind of, but yeah,
the reason I asked that though is because, like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, they all have their own ideas of like what specific emotions relate to what specific organs, or even Eileen, her human biofield anatomy, and then German New Medicine. There's so many different frameworks, and I found many of them to be largely accurate. Like in what Eileen found, it checked out and released that in my body. But then also I've had experiences with German New Medicine where the specific rash on the right side of my head related to a mother wound of having a separation conflict, and it all checked out without me having any preconceived ideas of either. So it's just interesting. So I wanted to know if
they're all working on different levels of the system. And there's like validation in all of those approaches. And for me, I've just searched so many years as a physician and as just a person so deeply interested in like true healing. What is the greatest leverage point I can do my work at? Because it kind of would have been easy to like, let me just be an acupuncturist and people will just get what I do. And I've studied bits of all of these things, and it's fascinating when you learn German New Medicine and you're like, this is like the holy grail we've all been looking for, or a lot of these different approaches. But then
I've also found German New Medicine in many ways to not be totally accurate, right? So like that's where it's like,
it's the right person, the right time, the right medicine. And that's why for me, it's all about inner alignment. When I adjust my inner alignment, like magically the right medicine shows up, the right person shows up, the right partners to do things with show up. And then the doors open and like, I booked my flight. I got here. It was the synchronicity. So for me, that has been the number one most powerful leverage point, is that when I adjust my inner alignment or help the client I'm working with do it for them, that the potency shows up, whether it's like, oh my God, I met a practitioner for German New Medicine, or, we found exactly the right homeopathic medicine. And this person was with severe hyperthyroidism, over and over hospitalized. The very next day after we did this session to assist her alignment, found this homeopathic remedy, and it was 100% resolved after that. So is it like, was it the homeopathic, or was it like, as we open the system to receive, the physical 3D universe aligns to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, damn, that's a really good point. I think it like also stresses the importance, in my opinion. Like I'm not saying German New Medicine is wrong or bad. Again, I've had experiences in my own life that it is absolutely accurate, but then I also have had experience where it's not. My point is, I think that when we get entrenched in a belief system regarding some specific framework and apply that to our body in an absolute way, I just don't think the body works like that. No. I think it's unique to the individual. There might be, archetypes in some areas that apply, and I think that there are incredible frameworks, but I think that there needs to be some sort of nuance when it comes to applying those frameworks when it comes to a unique individual.
Because we're navigating the now moment that is exponentially more complex than that. It's infinitely more complex than what any of the books we've already created could get us to.
Yeah.
So that's why we've got to go back to the now. What's here now? Connect with the now. Feel, sense the moment, soften your body, take a breath. You already are aligning your biofield and your nervous system.
What does that look like for you? Like, what are the practices that you do yourself in order to really get into your body?
I think my breath is a major part. And then I have something that's called the instant elevation technique, which is like the foundation for everything I do. So the first part is awareness. So it's ABC. I was an ER doctor, and that's all about like the immediate, go-to algorithm for airway, breathing, circulation, and it guides. One thing has to happen before the next. And so for me, awareness, breathing, conscious choice. When we bring awareness to the body, because I could say bring awareness to the now moment But you're like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Okay, just bring awareness to your breath. Bring awareness to your pelvis. Put your hands on your heart. Soften your shoulders. Bring awareness to your shoulders. You just got 2% more here. So you kind of erase the chalkboard of the like, what's going to happen later, or what was happening before. I got to make sure I call them back, or the outer world of, it doesn't exist actually. So you just get here. Awareness gets you access to your power. Okay, so there's your first piece. Then shifting the breath shifts your physiology. Of course, shifts your biofield immediately. But it really begins to shift your hormones, inflammatory cascade, your nervous system from sympathetic fight or flight to parasympathetic. I'm dropped in. It shifts your brain functioning from that high beta. I got to do this. Oh my God, Alec. Yeah, this is a great conversation. But you're actually like not dropped in. So you're kind of in a program. And so you can shift into slow beta or even alpha. Or in the practice I've done, dropping down to delta or theta, which, like I said, is that deep receptivity of, oh my gosh, I know exactly why that person has tinnitus. And she did get better with what I told her in that post.
Wow.
You can tune into that level of intelligence. So that's your second part. You just shift your breath, breathe deeply, slowly, let the belly expand out with the in-breath. You may even begin to feel the pelvis shift with the breath. You're moving. A lot of emotion gets stored in the pelvis. So as soon as you bring that breath from the upper lung fields and you relax that, it comes to your pelvis. It resets your brain functioning, your nervous system, your immune system, the whole thing. Well, then the second thing, which is just the least important, it's kind of the cherry on top, is your choice. It's where everybody's trying to put all the focus. But if you don't shift A and B, you can't make the right choices. I should do this. I should do that. Now, here's what I'm going to do. But your choices are all still coming from that high beta functioning programming of your conclusions and the program, So here I am. I'm breathing in my body. I'm 2% more aware. Sometimes it's not easy to get more than that. You're maybe in a very seemingly threatening situation. So you just got to let your body know, I'm here. Now conscious choice becomes available, maybe for the first time. And you realize like, whoa, wait a minute. Why am I doing that? What if I do this? Or you're in a maybe argument with your spouse or something happened with your child, right? Things that can seriously trigger you. And you practice this. All right, I can't believe she just said that. And you just like, I'm going to be in my body. I'm going to breathe. And maybe you realize, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to feel the moment. I'm going to feel me and I'm going to feel my partner. That's a choice. It may be a radically different choice than you've ever made before. And I guarantee you, when you begin choosing at that level, your life will radically change.
I love what you said there about bringing awareness to the different parts of your body. I practice Qigong, and Qigong, the way that I've come to learn it from my mentor, Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, is all about directing your thought energy towards different parts of your body as you breathe, to the Dantian specifically. And I found that to be an incredible practice to not only get me into my body, but a perfect individuated example of where you focus your thought energy actually flows there. Where awareness goes, energy flows. That's what people say, right? And you can experience that. You truly can when you do a practice like what you're describing or Qigong.
And it goes back to that ether and a fourth phase of water activation. Is like, am I playing the game at that level of the playing field? And so when we breathe or witness and bring our attention into the Dantian, right? This core where life force is soaring, coursing through our body. It's either closed down, trickling, or it's like opening. We're activating our ability to perceive and experience life at that deeper level where anything can happen. Right? How does spontaneous resolution of disease take place? Well, I'll tell you, as a physician, I have felt it's not only a smart thing to do, but that's my responsibility. to find out. Because if I tell you, no, there's nothing else can be done for your kid, let's just medicate them and hope they make it through. I sure the heck better know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Because when it's your own kid, you usually don't just take that. You're like, let me see if there's anything behind door number 2.
Right.
And you'll like explore on your own. You'll get open. You'll get curious. You'll consider doing things you never did before, like drinking your own urine, right? You're like, I don't care. Let me just consider, right? Yeah. And there's nothing threatening about that open, curious, receptive state. You're not going to be bamboozled into something that's not the right path. You're just open. You're not, granted, when people are afraid, they can also be susceptible.
Totally.
But that's because you're disconnecting.
Totally.
When you connect, all right, let me just open. What else is possible here? And you do what we just did here to connect, you're going to find things you never would have imagined. So yeah, let's bring that. Let's decide I'm going to be a real doctor who actually can explore what are the truths here.
Yeah.
Is there a way you could resolve MS? Is there a way you could resolve stage 4 cancer? And if there is, what might that be? Right. If there is, what might assist that? Hey, this one did it. That one did it. It's happened. Yeah. Now in the medical textbooks, they'll say that's an outlier. We're going to exclude that from the study because we don't understand it. Well, let's try to understand it.
Yeah.
We can begin to approach that.
Totally. And I hate when they say that that's an outlier. It's like, if there is an outlier, that means that your whole paradigm of what the true cause is for this and how to resolve this is completely flawed.
Is 100% flawed.
Yeah, it's 100% flawed, if there are any outliers whatsoever. So on that note, what are some of the things you've seen yourself, like some of the most miraculous examples of people who've worked with you and adopted your approach on mind-body health?
I've seen people get out of a wheelchair and they're walking, playing, hiking, skiing. One woman that had MS, I actually saw another woman who had severe MS, was told she'd die in the next 6 months. They had a hospital bed in the living room because she was in such a debilitated state with feeding tubes. Heal, completely resolve that entire disease and function normally, run around, play, you have a fruitful life. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is like genetic disorder. So it's a little more of like, well, this is a concrete thing. This is genetic. Debilitating pain at the chiropractor at least 3 times a week just to stay out of debilitating pain, in a wheelchair, unable to walk, would dislocate her joints spontaneously. And then the, sacrum would all of her spine would dislodge, sublux, with a complete resolution of disease. She no longer has Ehlers-Danlos. She's homeschooling her kids. She is happy, healthy, walking. Regeneration of the thyroid, where
literally like tissue regeneration.
Yes, where they said these nodules, you have a dysfunctional thyroid due to quote unquote Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Many
I love that you throw quote unquote, by the way, on all these, because that's what I say too.
Well, we have our mental construct of what we think's going on, but is it a thing?
No,
it's not a thing. No. It's an understanding, we're supposing. So as soon as we buy into that diagnosis, by the way, there's a whole bunch of like conclusions that go along with it, right? Yeah. You have a cancer, and there's this collective thinking that this means blah, blah, blah is going to happen. But none of those things are actually true. So I've seen the thyroid regenerate. People get off thyroid medication and no longer have Hashimoto's. I've seen, amazing guy who had severe long COVID. You got to do this.
I know. I long COVID. Yeah. Actually, funny enough, on that note with long COVID specifically, was just talking with an old friend of mine who presupposes a lot about the whole COVID thing and mostly agrees with me, and I'm pretty radical in my beliefs. Like I've, funded projects to falsify the foundations of the virological methodology and things like this. But the point is that I said, what else did you have going on in that time? And we established, she was like, oh my God, I was in perpetual stress and fear. And I'm like, that's what needs to be looked at. That's what needs to be looked at. Whoever's telling you that this is caused by this and you need to get on this specific pharmaceutical protocol has no clue what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, this person was disabled in the house for over a year, couldn't leave the house. Previously, like athletic, healthy guy, out of work now and on disability, and tried everything. Yeah. And healed. And his healing was like, kind of a spontaneous healing where we did this emotional work in the Embracing Health program. And he's like, I don't know what all this stuff is, but I'm going to give this a try. And within weeks was resolved. And he specifically said like there were these 3 waves of like emotional upheaval. And one was like, fear, and there was like another anger. And he had these releases using the work we do, and like got on his bike, biked for 2 hours, felt like $1 million. And then there was like a second wave, I don't know, a few weeks later. And then by that third one, and there was this grief and shame. And he just was like, because of the support, it's like a really safe environment. I could let all that energy go. I could meet this and like let my body catharsis it out. And he said, after that, and all my energy came back. I felt amazing. And I checked in and I absolutely knew we're done. I am complete. I'm healed. This is no longer part of my biofield. You know, this is, I have gotten to the level where I'm free to live my life. And he's engaged to be married, traveling the world, starting a new business. Incredible. I have seen especially when it's like severe, debilitating, taking you out of the game for so many people, the illness is like the body's last ditch effort to get you on the trajectory of life that you're actually here to do. But there's like maybe too much fear or too many programs. Like, I gotta feed my family, and you're not listening to the heart. So it's like, let's just disrupt this entirely. And then when people are led and find work like this, they open and like their entire life shifts in the most profound ways.
So what do you think, in your experience, is the common thread between all those people that you just named?
Willingness.
Willingness.
My mind is going because there was this woman with 30 years of severe, debilitating, daily, 24/7 migraines within weeks resolved. Same thing, all the medications, like what's going on? The willingness to let something in you don't already understand and you can't control. Because to the programming, that's a threat. Yeah, I tried that. Yeah, I know that whole positive thinking thing. And it's like the system trying to like keep itself together in the old arrangement versus like, I know nothing. Who knows what's possible? Now that's a state of curiosity, new brain patterning from high beta to like way down.
Yeah.
There's receptivity.
Wow. So would you say, in your experience then, the people who, and we already discussed this a little bit, the people who struggle to heal maybe still need to learn from their individual experience?
Sometimes there's attachment.
Yeah.
So just different things. One is like,
I know this is very general because it's going to be unique to the
it's a big things though.
Yeah.
There may be like a lack of forgiveness that it went this way. Like if I can heal myself, I should have done it yesterday. So I'm kind of making myself wrong or making it wrong that this even happened in the first place. So they're trying to kind of like rectify that at the same time versus like, it's not actually wrong. And you didn't do it. So like, you don't have to blame yourself. And you can truly let go of whatever was created up till now. So that's like another layer of like, it's sometimes hard for people to let that go. You're entering a whole new paradigm, but don't make the old one wrong. You can just slip right into this new, more free state.
What we're talking about here is like your own experience working with people who resolve various physical ailments using the power of thought energy is what I like to call it, right? And I say that is described as thought and feeling perpetually aligned or aligned and directed at something, like bringing awareness to something, right? Which manifests as emotional releases or whatever it needs to be for that unique individual. But this happens on the individual level and also on a collective level. And I just wanted to give the listeners or anyone watching this an indication on the collective level of how this could apply. And then I also want to hear from you on some of the research you've come across, because I know yesterday before we started recording, you were talking about like, I have all these papers that I'm trying to show all my colleagues. This is well established. This has been studied for a long time, but yet still the allopathic medical system and even a lot of alternative approaches to health, a lot of like the functional medicine space, which is largely, you have this blood test, which is really only a snapshot in time. Now, instead of pharmaceuticals, we're just going to give you endless supplements. Is still not understanding the emotional roots of a lot of, if not all of these things, right? So going to the collective level, so there's two things that I like to bring up, and I also covered this in episode 141. And this first one is coming from Daniel Reuters' book, Can You Catch a Cold?, which I cannot recommend enough. Like, that book is absolutely incredible. But one of the things he goes into is this phenomenon of mass psychogenic illness. And one of the specific examples that he gives is this antidepressant in New Zealand that had just gone off patent. A lot of companies started making their own generic version of that drug. And this one specific generic version a lot of people started reporting to New Zealand's adverse event reporting system that they were experiencing side effects. There's 27 common side effects that they had been experiencing that were being shared on the adverse event reporting system. Now, when the mainstream media decided to run a story on this specific generic drug that was causing adverse events, for whatever reason, and we can only speculate, they named only 6 of those 27 common symptoms. So when they ran a story sharing this with the masses, broadcasting this idea, this thought related to this drug, right? They only shared 6 of those 27 symptoms that had been reported. What then followed was that adverse events reports skyrocketed, but only in the 6 symptoms that the mainstream media had reported on. Yeah. Perfect example of unwittingly and sometimes wittingly, we can take on a thought and then pull it into our body with feeling, perpetually focus on it, and bring about real physical symptoms related to that specific thing. And then another example that I like to give is a study that was published, I think in 2022 or 2021, in part by the CDC, that found in 540,000 people who were hospitalized and subsequently died with a, quote, COVID label, the second strongest risk factor for death associated with that label was fear/anxiety related disorders. And that would imply to me that those are people who had already had a diagnosed fear/anxiety related disorder, not even accounting for what I would imagine to be the large amount of people who had no diagnosed disorder, but were in a state of perpetual fear and anxiety, given what was going on in the world, wound up in the hospital, wound up being put on remdesivir, all these crazy protocols related to what happened over the last 5 years, and then wound up dying. So those are just 2 examples in mass of how this absolutely manifests for better or for worse. And I know we can get into the better parts of this too, and that's what I want you to touch on, of how the power of our thought energy, which are coming from our foundational beliefs and things like this, things we've been programmed with for better and for worse, ultimately lead and can lead to physical manifestations of symptoms or physical healing. So aside from those anecdotal experience that you've had, which I don't doubt whatsoever, because I've heard and seen and experienced some crazy stuff on my own, what is some of the data that you've come across indicating the power of our mind to stimulate healing?
There is a cool book called Counterclockwise.
I've never heard of that
one. Where they looked at like how the mind affects the body. So you'd have a experiment. So these diabetics, your metabolism goes at a certain rate, and over time, you need to redose that insulin because of the way your body's utilizing sugar, and you got to make sure you redose the insulin. So when they would do this experiment and they'd like speed up the time on the clock, so now like it looks like 4 hours went by, but only maybe 3 hours went by. They were programmed into that, and their metabolism would match that, meaning they would require their insulin sooner than it would metabolically be needed, meaning their entire physiology is now listening to that mind program of, whatever it was, like, okay, 6 hours just went by, but only 4 hours had come by. So the metabolism would match what they thought and believed was actually happening. And then reverse, the same thing was true. When they slowed down the clocks, they would find the metabolism would match, and they wouldn't have the requirement for the insulin as quickly because now they're in a slower metabolic state. So your cells are listening to what's happening in the mind. Yeah. There were also studies they did where they had these like elderly people with like, degenerative joint disease, and measured their, not only how energized they felt or fatigued, I guess in the beginning of this, but like strength of certain joints, range of motion in certain joints, mental agility and functioning with like these testing that they would do. So they looked at all their flexibility, and then they had them spend a period of time back in like whatever year it was when they would have been 18 years old, healthy, young, and they played music and had posters, and like everything would look like way back at that time. So they spent like a week at this camp, and then they redid those same measurements, and people not only felt younger, like I'm 18 again, they actually had all the physiological measurements for like increased range of motion, increased agility, increased flexibility, improved cognitive function, so that when they got into the mindset of like who I was then, what was happening then, the cells are listening, and the body began to reverse disease.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so fun.
So
there's also really cool studies, and I'm not exactly sure what journal this one was published was in, but see, because I studied this stuff for decades, but even before I went to medical school, I was eating it up because I was alone with this. I'm like, what is the meaning of life? What is really happening here? So I read everything I could about how the mind affects the body. I studied Joan Borisenko, who's one of my favorite people in the world, because I went to see her speak at the Yankee Dental Conference that my dad, who was an oral surgeon, would speak at every year. It's this massive dental conference they have every year in Boston. So I would go to see my dad speak, and then this Joan Borisenko person would be speaking, and she talked about mind-body medicine. So I was like fascinated. But then the next year we went back, and they had like a twice as big room, and everybody was in there. And then the next year, it was like the grand ballroom filled up, standing room only for people to go and learn about this amazing mind-body medicine stuff.
Wow.
And to me, I first of all knew this is the future of my life, period, end. But
So cool.
I knew like, okay, this is a natural human attractor. Like, we know there's something deeper than what we've been told. We know there's this whole realm of possibility we're just beginning to tap into. And it's like our nature to want to explore that. So there was a study where a person with multiple personalities, when they were in like this one personality would be like a brittle diabetic with their metabolism, the pancreas is not making insulin, and they think, well, you got type 1 diabetes. That's it. You're never going to regenerate that. But in the other personality, totally normal metabolism. The pancreas is functioning
no
normally.
requirement for insulin.
No requirement for insulin. So these are the things you would see. And like we said before, even if you only an N of one example of that this can happen shows you that the paradigm you're functioning in is you got something wrong here. What is true that allows that I'm this person, I'm a healthy, vibrant person, or I'm a really active, outgoing person. Oh no, I'm a really shy person. To shift your physiology so significantly, the cells are listening.
Oh, damn, I love that so much. Okay, so the book was by Ellen J. Langer.
Thank you. Ellen Langer. And she did a ton of research with this kind of stuff. But that one is, they'd have these chambermaids who were, hey, how often do you exercise? Oh, I'm so busy. I'm working all the time. I don't get any exercise. And they'd have, measuring their weight and their body mass. And then they would educate them like, hey, when you're making the bed, when you're walking the stairs, when you're carrying all the supplies, like this is how many calories you're burning. And this is what's happening cardiovascularly. You're actually getting a lot of strength training and exercise. And so the ones who were made aware that this was exercise had a different physiological effect. Over the next few weeks, they measured them. They lost weight. They improved their biomass. They got healthier because of how the mind is interacting with what's happening.
It just reinforces the sort of like metaphysical, spiritual understanding that this is a realm of mind. Mind creates the body and not the other way around.
Mind creates the body.
Yeah, mind creates the body.
And your body's being created and recreated over and over. So for some people will be like, oh, but this has been 20 years for me, or this is genetic. Well, yeah. And it can be created from a new template.
Yeah, I think a perfect example of that is Anita Moorjani. Like her story is one of the best stories on that. Yeah.
Yes. And that was like, for me, okay, I see this one person who did this amazing thing, and the doctors were like, you're filled with cancer. She died and came back, right? Like, she not only was at death's door, she went through it. And when she had this shift in consciousness, which she said, like, I was in this fear-based paradigm of her Indian culture, and I've got to get married, I've got to do this, and this is my life. And there was so much fear. Well, that's what cancer is that inflammatory, underlying inflammation. So the cells don't know, I'm supposed to die off, and there's new cells coming in. So they just keep propagating. When she shifted her consciousness through what happened in that crossing over, she released the fear. She had no fear. So now she's back with that consciousness in that body. They couldn't find a single cancer cell. And I love that she said, they had to give me the chemo because they were just freaking out. We can't do nothing. We can't really identify what chemo we should be giving you because there's actually no cancer, but let's just give you this one. And she says there's like a skull and crossbones on this bag, but she was in that vibrational frequency where
this is after her near-death experience.
Yeah,
right?
this is after she comes back. It was like the next day. They're not like, well, I guess you can go home. 2 weeks later, she's dancing at a wedding, but that day that follows, they have to do something.
Yeah.
And she said, I let them do it because they needed to do it. And it was not a threat. She was in a consciousness where it's like, none of this is a threat to me. I can let this in. Not telling people, go drink arsenic because, hey, your mind and body can heal. But it is possible, and that's also been demonstrated by yogis, and that when you're in certain states, your body is not susceptible to the frequency of where those things are toxic.
Right. 100%. God, this stuff is so fascinating to me. And then when you employ the understanding of fourth phase water, Veda Austin's work, Masaru Emoto, the biofield and all that, which I want to get into in a minute, I think like it all makes sense. Of course, this is how it works. But the other one that I wanted to bring up, and I think you would probably do this justice better than I would to explain it, was the various studies that have been done on the power of prayer and intention. I know one example of that is the Heart Math Institute has done a really good job of documenting this. When you get a group of people together to meditate with a specific intention to lower crime rate in any city, insert any city, and they all focus their thought energy on that, and they even have people doing it around the clock, the crime rate does actually lower measurably, and it's statistically significant in that city, unbeknownst to the people who are in that city. They have no clue that these people are meditating on their behalf, and then it does actually lower the crime rate in that city. So again, it applies to the collective for better as well. I brought up those examples of mass psychogenic illness. It applies in a positive way as well.
You have to understand the premise that we are connected. And so that's why it's so fascinating with telepathy tapes being like a #1 podcast. Like people are actually letting in this truth that we're not separate, that it doesn't end, within the boundary of my body. We can actually communicate. So then it's not so much of a jump to see that focusing intention in a healing, positive way of truly like sending love and compassion to a person, maybe a friend who's sick or your kid or a group, a community would affect the mass consciousness of the individuals in that area. And yeah, we see that it actually does. Isn't that cool? So now instead of saying, well, we don't understand how that happens, so let's just keep that over there and focus on the real science, we can start to say, oh, this makes sense. Yeah. Of course, that would be the natural expectation of an experiment like that. Yeah. And hey, what else can we do with this?
Yeah, what else can we do with this? And that's where my mind goes, is like, what else can we do this? How powerful are we really? And like, I mean, I've said this on a number of episodes, and like it's almost redundant at this point, but it is so incredible. My son's about to take a blindfolded reading course here in the next month.
Okay, my kids are both registered for that.
For the same one. I know. Yeah, Dr. Edith already let me know. Well, I've seen it.
So cool.
I know. So I think you're literally in my group with my son. So I'm really excited about that, because I was just talking to Edith about it the other day. But I've seen it in person, and when you see it in person, it's it's life changing. Even if you already know and understand this stuff, seeing in person like changes.
Well, if you go to seeingwithouteyes.com, they have lots and lots of videos on this. I think that was in Germany. So I first saw that, and my daughter and I were like, "We're flying to Germany. We're doing this." And it was a few weeks later, we heard about Edith's course.
How did you find out about Edith's course?
At your event.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes more sense.
Yeah, we met her. We became friends. Actually, she was in my community. She's like, Dr. Kim, I'm so excited to meet you. We started talking, and then she told me what she was doing, and I was like, we're all in.
Amazing. Yeah. I also had the fortunate opportunity, and like, it's so funny. I don't want to go off on a tangent on this necessarily, but like, these are not party tricks. It's not about the act of even blindfolded reading, or what I was just about to bring up. I participated in a Qigong 4-week class almost 5 years ago now with Dr. Edith, led by her, on spoon bending. And 12 of the 16 of us that were in the class were able to bend a spoon by the end. And it's not about the spoon bending. It's not about the blindfolded reading. It's about what it teaches you about who and what we truly are, and how we're connected, and how this reality works. It's oh my gosh, that's what it's about. That's what
beyond what you think is the truth.
Yes.
Go beyond what you're defining as reality.
Yeah.
And so it's you imagine how these kids' brains are going to learn to function in a more expansive way doing this course. So yeah, I don't think my kids need to read with blindfolds on.
No.
Oh, that's a cool thing to do. It really was about, whoa, who can they become and what can they access? What kind of intelligence can they let in? Because when I was in osteopathic medical school, so I was a second year now, we're doing our diagnosis and treatment. I'm getting tested. Dr. Gretchen Sibley's over here, and I'm working with my roommate, Jen. And now you're kind of like getting tested on what you're able to feel and sense and diagnose. And so I'm feeling up and down Jen's body, and I'm like, 3 or 4 times I'm going like, I don't know. I guess let's just say that T5 is rotated right and side bent right. That's like a lesion. And she puts down her notepad and she comes over and she's like, Kim, and she feels Jen's back. And she goes, you just went up and down Jen's back 3 times and went back to the exact same spot. And then you said, I don't know, but, and then you called out the exact lesion of the positioning of her spinal segment, of exactly what's going on in her body.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, I just did that. That's exactly what I just did. And I realized in that moment, my system was letting in information that I was blocking.
Wow.
I didn't understand that consciously.
Right. Your logical mind can get in the way on this stuff sometimes. I didn't let it in.
I didn't know I had just done that. Yeah. And I didn't know why I made up hey, let's just say she has this. You're letting in information all the time.
Yeah.
There's a book called Deep Listening. Can I tell this weird story?
No, please do. That's
so
fun,
I was at Barnes & Noble's way back in medical school in Portland, Maine. I'm like studying, and I'm like, let me take a walk around. This book falls off the shelf, and it's this bright yellow book. And I'm like, how did this book fall off the shelf? So I pick it up, I devour, because I used to speed read. So I read like almost the whole book. And I'm like, this is fascinating. And it's all about this guy who was studying in his classes about how the conversation that's going on at the conscious level is like one thing, but then if you actually decipher the underlying meaning, there's like a whole other depth of what's actually getting communicated.
Wow.
And when you learn to listen deeply, which is exactly what I'm doing in my practice, it's all I'm doing. I'm listening deeply to your whole system, your words, your tone, and multiple dimensions of what you're expressing to get the truth. And so he's kind of observing this and writing this amazing book about it. So I get to the end of the book and it says, this guy teaches at the University of New England. That's where I was teaching in my fellowship when I was doing my osteopathic fellowship. So I'm like, okay, this guy's like across the way. And then the other thing was he lives in State College, Pennsylvania. We had just bought property in State College, Pennsylvania, where my first husband was from.
Did you end up connecting with him afterwards?
Yeah, I ended up meeting him. Super cool guy, super cool work. But it just shows you, like, if you can listen deeply, there's a whole other sea of what's really happening.
Yes.
So, hey, let it in. But where was I going?
I don't know, but that was awesome. Thank you for that story.
So this is really just beginning to expand your perception and let information in through these channels that are not ordinary. Yeah, I didn't know I knew what was happening in her back, but from that day on, I said, I'm going to start letting information in, consciously letting it in, no matter how it's coming from. I'm going to allow myself to perceive, because the last thing I want to do as a doctor is like, well, I can't really know what's going on in her back. I don't know. I'm not sensitive enough. And then discount it. But then what did I say? I said exactly the thing. So we're doing this all the time, and we could do it more willingly. We could let in a lot of more information. Does it take a little courage at first? Like, I've known when someone's going to live, when someone's going to die, or when it's likely that this is the process they're in. This is a death process. And many, many times where it's like, I just got to tell this person, no, this is not cancer. No, I mean, this happened dozens of times. One time I was at dinner with someone and she's telling me her mother-in-law just got diagnosed with stage 4. I think it was sarcoma. This is bad. And I just felt like, no, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. And I'm like, Kim, you can't just, go, what if it's not? What if you don't know? But I do
Especially with stage 4, because like I could see where that.
Oh my gosh.
That's where the logical mind, it's so tough on that.
You have to find courage to listen to that inner. Now, some of the stuff's more subtle. It's not going to take you for a flying leap. You just start listening to the heart. You find the courage to speak your truth. But they're having these moments where I'm like, should I say it? And it's like, ding, 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 ding. This girl's suffering and the whole family's suffering. And I said, look, that's not what's happening. She's going to live a long, happy life. I don't know how long. I just know it's not this. This is not the end for her. This is not, she's going to maybe have some miraculous resolution. All I know is that's not the path she's on. She came and told me, I think it was months later, she said, within that week, they ended up finding out it was a complete misdiagnosis.
Wow.
She had osteoporosis and some kind of like inflammation temporarily, and the whole thing got thrown out.
Wow.
So sometimes you got to trust it. It does take a little bit of courage.
Yeah.
Especially when you're like a doctor and you're not supposed to like say the wrong thing. So I've just given myself a little bit of grace. I'll let people know like this is not a medical diagnosis, but here's what I know for absolute sure. And every time it's happened, that has been spot on.
Wow. What if nature's intelligence could directly influence your physiology, helping to regulate your nervous system, sharpen your intuition, and shift your emotional state in a measurable way? For over 25 years, Lotus Way has been pioneering the use of flower essences, liquid infusions that capture the bioenergetic imprint of plants. Unlike essential oils, these remedies work on a vibrational level, interacting with your body's meridians and electrical system to promote clarity, resilience, and balance. Katie Hess, who I featured on episode 74 of the Way Forward podcast, has spent decades studying the effects of over 300 rare and powerful flowers, hand collecting them from across the world. The result? A line of elixirs, mists, and anointing oils, and even some chocolate, designed to shift your state of mind and body, not through placebo, but through the subtle yet profound ways plant frequencies interact with human biology. I think flower essences are severely overlooked in the wellness space because it really is an incredible way to package up the wisdom and the innate intelligence of nature and deliver it to your body. And it brings your body back into coherence because it's tuning you on an energetic level like an instrument. So if you want to find which flower essences are right for you, you can take the flower quiz so you can see which ones match your current energetic state. As a listener of The Way Forward, you get an exclusive discount. Just use code ALEC10 for 10% off your first order. Or if you're the Way Forward member, get 20% off plus ongoing savings, and just reach out to us if you're a member and we'll get you your membership discount. Just go to lotusway.com/Alec or just head to the show notes so you can experience one of nature's most powerful energetic remedies today. Hey y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from Remedy Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at The Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and Remedy in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world, and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model, whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled, we have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylie is also enrolled as well, so my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Remedy Academy, also RMDY Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there. When it comes to your experience of people, because I know, I won't name names, but I know other people who have similar abilities. And I've asked him, I'm like, dude, can you just like tune into people? And he's like, I can, but I wait for the invitation to, because I feel like it's a violation of them if not. And so sometimes I can't help it because I'm just sitting around them and I'm like, shit, like this is here and present with me and I just naturally feel it in my body. Yeah. But I try not to like make a deliberate effort to tune into freaking Taylor Swift and try to figure out what's going on with her because I feel it's a violation. How do you experience it? Is it like you just naturally know when you sit next to someone? Is it some people it is natural and it happens, some people it doesn't? What is that like?
I'll tune into if they're ready to hear it. So sometimes people are like, my life's miserable and I can't stand my husband and blah, blah, blah. There was a guy I was next to at a business conference and super successful, multiple, he had like multiple 10-figure businesses. He's overseeing them. And it was this great guy. And he said, my wife and blah, 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 and my marriage. And he was like really all of a sudden went into this different energy. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work for you to keep going that way. Like, what kind of success is your life if like this is your freaking wife? That's kind of like central. And he immediately opened and said, you're 100% right.
Wow.
I know I need to make this change. And so I kind of took the liberty because we're in a business group where that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing is like, we're there to support each other.
Got it.
So I just, you kind of always ask like, how would they need to hear it? So I inserted like, you can't have a truly wealthy life and carry on that way in your marriage.
Wow.
And so you kind of can always ask, how would this go over if I said it this way? Or how does a person need to hear it? And you just, once you tune in, it's all about creating the circuitry. You got to create the like circuitry to even listen to the heart. And that's a lot of heart math. It's like you're creating new neural networks.
Yeah.
And so now you're like, okay, I'm tuned in. Yep. I'm going to approach it this way. And sometimes by the way, the guy did have an amazing breakthrough. And like during the break, we're outside, we're doing EFT tapping. He's like, I feel like I connected with this inner child. And I know I've needed therapy for a long time, like 30 years. And I just had like 30 years of therapy, in a 15
And he'd never done any of this stuff really? Like never had
No,
wow.
He was a little like, whoa.
Wow.
But he was right there.
Wow.
And so I'm always listening to their system. I learned when I started first doing this work, like, you can only go where they're willing to go.
Yeah,
you can't assume if someone comes in and says like, I have fibromyalgia and can you help me? That they're actually willing to go fibromyalgia free. You can't assume. It sounds like, well, yeah, they're asking for my help. It's even as a doctor, you never want to assume that they actually want to heal. Ooh. I had a guy once say to me,
you have to want this. Yeah, that's why you go back to, you said willingness. They really have to really want it. Yeah.
I had a guy who was an MD psychiatrist, and my colleague sent him to me. She was an acupuncturist I had been sharing my office with. And he said, I know you can't make my pain go away, but maybe you can just help me manage it. And I was like, well, what if I could help you make it go away? Would you be open to that? And he just kind of laughed because he realized how closed, he was multiple years with this pain, on multiple narcotics, doing everything he could. He even went to an acupuncturist.
Notions there.
He's like, hell yeah. So he realized like, oh, that's kind of funny. Yes, I would be open.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did the osteopathic treatment, but I was like, I've been learning this new stuff and can we do some of this? And we did some EFT. And so he had just said like, no, there's nothing emotional. This is just all physical. And they said, I have this and the, degeneration and a slip disc and a . Okay, but we did it. And so as soon as you start neutralizing the electromagnetic channels, because it's all you're doing with tapping, giving the brain a new open message, he started to realize, I'm afraid it's going to get worse. I'm embarrassed because all my biking friends are seeing that I can't bike and I'm trying to be, cool and overcome it, but like I feel weak. So there was embarrassment, there was shame, it comes right out. So after we tapped on the physical, that's what presented were these thoughts of like, what if it gets worse? So there's emotions. You can get to the emotions once you start with that physical. So it was like, you just tap on that fear, acknowledging how I'm so afraid I might get worse. And then what would happen? Would my wife still respect me? And I'm embarrassed. Like, what, am I a wuss that I can't push through this? So you can see like that masculine energy. It's just embedded in there.
Totally.
So
and the whole point of tapping on that too, because as I've learned it, is that you're tapping on what is first in order to release what is, and then you reorder it in a different way, signaling to your cells to what you want them to be.
Essentially. Yes.
Yeah.
You're tapping on what's here in order to release the resistance to what's here. And then it's like, oh yeah, there is some fear here. And it's like, as opposed to, no, there's no fear. I just have a medical problem. The protection.
Totally.
So the guy got better. I was actually filming in this TV station the next day. So I remember I was in the green room and I was like, this is the coolest moment of my life, because he called me and he said, I don't know what you did and I'm sure it's going to come back, but I have had the first pain-free day I've had in years.
Wow.
And
you see, like, I'm sure it's going to come back, and you're like, that's the neural
circuitry.
Yeah,
that's the, those circuits, it's like train tracks.
Yeah.
So you're like, yeah, that's probably where the train's going to go. It's pretty well trodden path. So he came back. This is a little bit of a story, but he came back and he did not want to do any more of that psychological work.
Wow.
Flash forward a year later, we did work together again, and it was in 4 minutes of tapping. He was completely pain-free.
Wow.
And went forward with that.
Wow.
Did amazing. Yeah.
Wow,
but stunned, like the guy was just like, he literally had to just sit there and take a moment and kind of stunned silence. And you could see his whole paradigm of reality rearranging itself.
Yeah, and this is why, I love that things like telepathy tapes are reaching the forefront. Veda Austin, are you familiar with Veda Austin?
I did. I interviewed her a couple years ago.
She's also speaking at Confluence. She's also speaking at Confluence. I got to show you the lineup. Great. It's pretty wild. Our lineup this year is pretty stacked. Amazing. We're stoked for it. But when you understand her work and then apply that to it, the understanding is, what is water in a dish and being imprinted? We're made of water. What do you mean? It permeates all facets of reality. It is tremendously impactful or can be on how you understand how this reality works. And then when it comes to mind-body medicine, it's less woo-woo because it makes it more physically tangible when you're understanding things like what telepathy tapes is teaching, Gerald Pollock's work, Veda Austin's work, your work, Eileen McCusick's work, and putting it all together. It's like, this is how it works. And I have a few more questions before we get into that because I want to give you my framework of how I think it works with the fourth phase water and all this stuff, and I want to hear your idea of it. But the questions are, when you try to share these studies with your colleagues who are caught up in the allopathic system,
which I don't do anymore, by the way.
Okay, well, when you did, what was their response to it back then?
So there were,
because there's plenty of published literature on this for those who outsource to that idea that you need peer-reviewed studies. There's lots of peer-reviewed information on this topic.
So you're not ready to see what you're not ready to see, and if you're not complete with the paradigm of separation, fear, and lack, it's not a bad thing. It's not wrong. You actually got to play it out until you're ready to move into courage and to move into true creatorship. So at that time, they were asking me, I'll share with anybody who's asking me. And there was one guy who was actually open because all they were really saying is that's a bunch of crap. When I was talking about my enthusiasm for this work, and they were like, yeah, no. And I said, well, this is, there's scientific data on that. They were like, show me the studies. So I went to Harvard Library. I got the studies. I brought it to the next session that we had. We were in a class together. And the other guys, they just said nothing. They never spoke to me again. And then this one guy was kind of that same stunned silence of whoa, what? It kind of like you mentioned that urologist who they were talking about the stem cells in urine. She's like, that's not true. And then went on a PubMed search and found there's stem cells in urine. What did I not know here?
Yeah.
So that some people are ready for that little bit. I mean, that's a big shift. When I had this awakening experience, you guys, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Well, especially not as a 16-year-old in the nature of how you've done it. And that's where I'm very cautious personally about plant medicines.
You don't want to disrupt someone's paradigm of reality while they're still grounding into it and committed to it.
Yeah, especially as a teenager. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a whole choice. You're going to have the blue pill or the red pill. I'm going to give you the illusion that you're making the choice because you're actually really not. But there's this point where you could hypothetically go in a different direction. And when you're ready, you're ready. And when you're not, you have to honor that. And that's what the sort of masculine feminine approach is like. There's a part of you that's not ready to let go of what is keeping your pain in place or your disease in place. And you want to fight against that? Well, let's go another decade trying to fight that versus can you accept that and embrace that even for just 10 seconds? Because sometimes that part of you, all it actually needs is your unconditional love.
That's actually a perfect segue into my next question. And maybe I'm starting with more of a statement first, because I just really crystallized what I've been thinking about with the human heart. Because I just interviewed Dr. Stephen Hussey, and we talked about how the heart is not a pump. It's actually a vortexing
everybody.
Device. Yeah, I just interviewed him last week. He was here. Yeah. Are you
maybe I'll hang out here more.
Are you familiar with his work?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we talked at length about how the heart is not a pump, and I had already been exploring a lot of that because Dr. Tom Cowan's a mentor of mine. But it just makes sense now, knowing that the electromagnetic field of the heart is much larger than that of other organs, even our brain, even though the heart's much smaller than the brain. And it also makes sense that a lot of ancient cultures talked about the heart being the seat of the soul. And I think that the biofield is largely an amalgamation of all the various individuated fields of our body, but I think it's largely comprised of that of the heart, because the heart is the biggest signature,
the most potent.
Right. So it totally makes sense that in order to truly heal, and also in order to tap into some of these psychic phenomena, because you talk to people about blindfolded reading, or even when I was learning spoon bending with Qigong, so much of that, yes, it's being able to tap into the lower Dantian, but mostly tapping into here. It's pulling your individuated awareness into here, because when you pull it into here, that then makes it so that you can access that broader part of your field. Yeah. And that broader part of your field is what is then imprinting the water of your own body when it comes to individual healing. But that's also how you can tap into the ether and then extend your own field to tap into what other people are feeling, or tap into your intuition at greater length, or be able to do some of these so-called psychic phenomena. It just all makes sense to me now. So it wasn't a question. Do you have anything to add to that?
I do have something to say. I want people to be aware, like I use this expression a lot, like the 2%, just be open 2%, because it does sound like, oh God, I'm going to study like 20 years on top of the mountain with the yogis to like get to that level of, but it's like, oh no,
I don't think you need to though.
The change physically and physiologically happens so readily, even with just 2%, where you're like, I have no idea what these people are dying about, but let me just like soften my body. Yeah. So as soon as you do that, you are already in a higher frequency in a significant way. Not a like, oh yeah, but it's like an ant climbing a mountain. Maybe I got 2%. It's significant. It will deeply impact what's happening in your cells and your body's ability to like resolve and release, detoxify from heavy metals, or overcome and release the Epstein-Barr or the Lyme disease. Like it's a 2% shift that lets your immune system go from being totally overwhelmed with Lyme and like nothing you do is getting rid of, or Candida overgrowing, to like that little quantum shift that now allows like Candida cannot grow in my body. Lyme is no longer hosted here, and the body heals. Yeah. So it's encouraging to remember that, because especially when you're in the deepest nuggets of like meeting these densities of like self-hatred or loathing or fear, or like that unprocessed grief from maybe someone died 20 years ago and you're like, I'm just staying positive. It's still in your system. It can move in 5 minutes just with that little 2% of the willingness to like embrace that depth of grief.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I also love when you say your cells are listening. And I've heard other people say that before, but like really talking with you two, it's crystallized a lot, especially with my understanding of fourth phase water now. So just to revisit this very briefly for those who are listening and watching, Dr. Gerald Pollack in his lab in Washington State, the state of Washington, not Washington State University. I think he's actually at Washington University in Washington State, has been doing a lot of work studying this form of water that forms when water is exposed to hydrophilic or water-loving surfaces. And that's a fourth phase of water where it's not fully liquid, it's not fully solid, it's almost in between the two. It's like a gelatinous-like form of water, which he has referred to as a liquid crystal. And he's done repetitive experiments showing that water, when it's in this state, is able to store, transmit, and receive information. It forms this zone of exclusion where the inner part of the water has a high negative charge, pushing out anything that's positively charged, solutes, toxins to the perimeter, creating this sort of water battery where you have negative charge, positive charge next to each other. Charge separation means that you have basically a form of battery. The reason I bring this up is because, like I said, water, when exposed to hydrophilic surfaces, creates this form. Our cell membranes and virtually every part of our body are hydrophilic surfaces. So this is likely the type of water that our bodies are comprised of. Especially, when you cut your arm, you don't spurt out a geyser from your arm, and it's because even though we are comprised of 70% water, 2/3 by weight, 99% molecularly, it's this ordered form of water, this structured fourth phase form of water. Now, relating it back to Veda Austin's work or Masaru Emoto's work, they have repeatedly shown that when water is exposed to anything physically or metaphysically, but right now we're talking about mind-body. So specifically when it's exposed to our thought energy. And Veda has distinguished too between Water knows what you're feeling. So even if you try to think your way and imprint the water, it will not work. It has to be thought and feeling, which makes so much sense in the context of your work too.
Yeah. What ignites the bioelectric field to actually change.
Right. And one more piece I want to add with Veda's work specifically too, because it all ties in. Veda's shown that the water is most impressionable when it is in the midst of a phase change, meaning that Veda's freezing method requires that water is in the freezer for just enough amount of time where it's going from liquid to solid, because what she does is takes the water out, dumps the upper part of the liquid that hasn't fully frozen off. So in the midst of the phase change is when water is most impressionable. The water in our bodies is essentially, you could say, in the midst of a perpetual phase change because it's not fully liquid, not fully solid. So when you apply the work of Veda to our bodies, it all just totally makes sense with respect to how our thoughts and feelings, when aligned, can help change our physiology at a very deep level. And I was so excited to tell you that, by the way.
That's like the magical thing right there, is like, how magical is this technology?
Yeah.
That we are holding this container that's in a phase shift, perpetually in a phase shift.
Yeah.
It's not liquid. It's, it's this plasma.
Yes.
That it's like a ether. That's the magical element.
Yes.
That can do all things.
Yes.
All things are possible. And the technology of the body, I always say it's like you have this, like a rocket ship, okay, that can go out beyond the stratosphere, hypothetically speaking, of course, and you're using it as a storage closet. Well, it's going to work as a storage closet. We got a little shoe rack over here. I'm going to hang my clothes over there. Yeah, this is what it is, right? We see the body as just this purely physical thing. You got to put stuff in. You have this waste products coming out. Like, you're totally missing what this thing can actually do.
Yeah.
What this piece of technology is actually created for. You are a manifesting machine, and we are now just beginning to activate that potentiality within ourselves. You're a creator. It's time to know it.
Oh, so beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah.
So in reference to the spoon bending thing, which I love The Matrix, by the way, that when that movie came out, it was like 10 dimensions open for me of like, people now are going to get it. And this is like the real world. Okay. So, in the movie, they say, you can't bend the spoon. That's impossible. And he says, why is that? And she said, there is no spoon. So the thing you have to realize about disease, you actually can't cure the disease. You can only awaken to a higher dimension of reality wherein you are healed. Mm-hmm. And the more you focus, what you focus on expands. The more you focus on the disease or on healing the disease, the more you anchor yourself into that density where the disease exists. You cannot fight that demon. Wetiko, right?
Yeah.
It will be strengthened. It will be amplified. You'll be stronger and it will be stronger, right? Let's fight cancer. Okay, now it's $1 billion coalition.
Totally.
Wait, what is happening? Well, Wetiko, right? The more we put into it, the more it's going to be alive. But so what can we do? We begin to reside in a frequency that's higher than the one where that exists, than the one where that has power, than the one where that is a problem. And that applies to everything from like diseases and diagnoses and weird symptoms that you don't even have a name for.
Political happenings, literally all of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
Your husband, your mother-in-law. No, you don't understand. She's a narcissist. That's a reality you're continuing to recreate and buy into. And it's sometimes kind of like, but don't I get to finally be free? Not that you. The you that has the problem doesn't actually exist. So you can't actually fix any of this. But can we emerge into a higher state of consciousness where we're free? Yes. Just like when we have to resolve the whole, like, you're under the jurisdiction of the state and you're not free and, I've got to be free. I'm going to do this process.
I'm going to fight the system.
For years. That was such a convoluted path.
Right.
And for me, it was my pain body trying to play out like I'm running from my dad. I'm scared to death. I'm terrorized and there's no way out. Playing that over and over and over and over. And Wetiko, it's going to just keep giving you more material for that novel. Or I actually had to meet this deep, deep terror. And there were things that happened in the last few years for me that were really, really, really challenging. A lawsuit, a person sharing lies about me that were so horrifying. I was like, how can this even be happening? And then what did it bring up for me? Okay, fear, guilt, like you kind of like, if this person believes this about, is there some, I'm a bad person. It's like, you got to let it go. You're never going to fix what somebody believes about you. You're never going to prove. So what it brought for me was I have to prove my worth. I have to prove my value. I have to prove I'm a good person. And all of this was in my own lifetime. I can see it in my timeline. And I have to fight to be safe. I'm never going to actually be safe, but I have to keep fighting outrunning the dragon. So there's huge, major foundational patterns for me. And when was it happening? At the very moment where I'm most asking to really ascend in my own power, right? Like I have this vision when I'm young. I finish medical school. When I say the seas were parted for me, like doors always opened. Got into this school, got into this residency, magically made it through that without antidepressant medications. Went through my life, didn't die being an ER doctor, just died. Please get me out of here. I'm starving in this role. Like, where's my real life? So you keep resolving and like life keeps opening. And like, here I am in this pinnacle of like really moving through something very substantial for like a 7-figure business to like a 8-figure life shifting, paradigm shifting or beyond of what I'm intending to create as a foundation for a true medical system, a conscious medical system where everyone can begin to live healthy. We are disease free. Their chronic illness doesn't need to exist in this paradigm. What? The fact that I can even speak that now, we're in a new space. So now I'm in this, what did you call the phase shift? I'm in my own phase shift. And all this deep, deep, deep stuff came up at like a 20 out of 10 level. There's a reason for that. Yeah, there is a reason why shit hit the fan. And like, I had to meet the depth of this, not just fear, terror cellularly. And it wasn't even just like the system's going to get me or this legal thing or this person slandering my name and spreading lies. It was like, there's something bigger than that because so what? You're just gonna, got to pay some money. I don't work the rest of my life. The level of terror was bigger than all of the circumstances. So I was like, I'm on to you. This is something bigger than the specifics. So I just met the energy. I met the energy of that level 10 terror. I can just say even 2% curious.
And this is your practice. Like you are now having to practice what you preach too, which 100%. Is incredible.
So that in the last couple of years, and now I have a whole new team. We're doing amazing things. There's so much fun. There's so much joy. There's so many people finding this work. So many new colleagues I've had. The freaking telepathy tapes come out and like really set the stage for people being able to even get what I do. And like, you're not weird at all. You're totally normal. Yeah. That is a miracle. But that's the miracle in my life that opened up as a result of like walking, your dark night of the soul over and over. This was like the extreme of the dark night of the soul. It's just to actually meet that cellular terror that got locked in, that there's a dragon chasing me. And like, then it's the whole freaking governmental system. When you start learning about this stuff that you're teaching too, you can really make that a big nightmare.
Totally.
And so we have to not ascend beyond it, right? That's yes, but also like fully embody it willingly embody it, ascend beyond it, fully embody it willingly. And that's the marriage of the masculine and feminine.
And that's where you can look at a lot of these traumatic experiences, if you recognize them for what they are, is a gift, like as a tremendous gift, as an opportunity for transmutation, as an opportunity, as a catalyst presenting itself.
How would I've ever gotten to that depth of wherever I still held that in my biofield of like fear, shame, terror? Was it still in there somewhere? Yeah. Was I accessing it? Not by myself. And then these things come up to help us make conscious what was unconscious.
Totally. And especially if you want to up level, like, I don't like that word up level, but become more fully embodied within yourself, you're gonna be presented with things that help you have to clear that out if that's truly your desire.
Yes. And it's like that behind the door of your greatest challenge or like the disease or whatever is your greatest freedom. Everything that you have been asking for.
Yeah. Amen. So well said. This has been such an awesome conversation. It's been so rad. I hope you had fun. I had a lot of fun.
It's been amazing. I knew it was going to be. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for having me come.
This is absolutely. Is there anything else you want to get into before we like close up?
I definitely want people to know that no matter what they got or didn't get or understood or didn't understand, just really truly soften your body and breathe your heart. It is that simple. Like Dorothy with the click the heels together. Mm-hmm. You had it in you all along. Click your heels. You've been wearing those shoes the whole time. And that's, you know, the Kundalini rising. It's like she's clicking the heels and she's intending. There's no place like home. What is she doing? Pairing the intention with a strong emotion.
Yeah.
Pairing the intention with a strong emotion and the grounded certainty. There's no place like home. I am free. I am taken care of. I am provided for. All is well. And that is what allows the activation.
Beautiful. I guess one more thing before I ask you about all of your offerings. And if anyone's interested in that already, please just head to the show notes, but we'll talk about that at the end. Is obviously that's powerful on the individual level. And obviously we talked about like the implications of collective, like intention and feeling. But I just want to like touch on what this world could look like. First, I'll say that I don't know if darkness will ever fully be eradicated, because I think that it offers, if you look at it for what it is, it offers us an opportunity to deepen into ourselves and into love and into compassion by experiencing the individual and collective darkness that we experience. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit back and be like, darkness is there and I don't need to do anything about it. I'm going to align my thoughts, feelings, and orient my action towards creating better things, right? Yes. How powerful do you think it'll be in the near future as more people start recognizing this and gathering together with that collective thought and intention oriented towards a better future?
Unstoppable. Yeah. You know, when you pop popcorn, it's like nothing's happening. And then you maybe get like, and it all accelerates. So that exponential growth curve. So I've seen over the last, few years where you're in the like, nothing's happening. I'm teaching this work. I'm like, I know the power of this.
And you're like, where is everyone? Yeah, right.
And then it's all of a sudden like that first inflection curve on the exponential growth curve was like, oh yeah. We got like the What the Bleep movie came out where I was like, I don't know if this was for you too, but the cat's out of the bag. Everyone's going to see. It's all there. Quantum physics. We create a reality. And then it was like, oh, that movie was kind of boring. Yeah. Or like, yeah, that was okay. I'm like, wait, you're missing it. And then, The Secret. And everyone's like, oh my God, law of attraction. We have creative power within us. So there were, and then of course the last few years with this whole like experience with this, hypnotic illness and the whole of everybody being in a mass frenzy. That inflection point where people begin to see like, whoa, everything I'm being told isn't necessarily like, I can't just blindly accept that my government's absolutely telling me the truth no matter what. And like, they can just take care of me and I don't even have to think twice about that.
Right.
And this whole thing happened to show us, really, I think the question was like, should we be able to think for ourselves or should we outsource our thinking?
Right.
Which isn't the same as like consulting. Right. I know I have my intention. I'm going to use my creative power and we're going to collaborate versus like, I don't think I'll just outsource that and you go do it for me. And so it's like, wait a minute, I can't just completely blindly trust these authority figures. And it was all to show us like, nope, because the power's in you.
Yeah.
So you ready to take back your power now? Okay, how about we turn up the juice on that? How about we turn up the volume on like how much pain it's going to be to keep outsourcing and just giving your power away? So a lot of people began to see, well, right now we're at that last inflection point, right as it goes into like astronomical.
I think so too.
Unending, massive amounts of opening. And that, it's like that inflection curve, it's like time and how much ever you're putting into the system, right? And now it's just going to be like, boom, we're activating that human collective. We're activating the technology of our body. It is meant to create heaven on earth. And that's where we are right now, is at that last inflection point. So like, enjoy the ride right now, because we're in those last few moments of perceiving only through separation, where now the collective is inevitably popping on a mass scale into oneness.
Boom. What an incredible way to end it. I'm so glad I asked that last question. Thank you for saying that, Kim. That was so beautiful.
Thank you for giving me the forum to share that.
Yeah,
I've had that
so
alone
beautiful.
with myself for a long time. And
I was over here just smiling like this the whole time, like, yes. That was
a magical
amazing.
moment. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you for being here. Yeah, please share as we're wrapping up your offerings, everything that you got going on. And we'll link that all in the show notes, but I just want to hear from you as well.
So my platform is drkimd.com, and we share free resources every week, Mind, Body, TV. I do a broadcast about this kind of stuff, but in a tangible way, like how do you heal your relationships? Or what if you really feel stuck in your symptoms and you can't accept it? And how do you apply this? And drkimd.com/health is our signature program where we're working with large groups of people for you to implement this yourself. And we have coaches and mentors who've been through this, like literally healed. One person was 3 years in the bed with severe chronic fatigue syndrome, flagrant Lyme. Nothing could heal her. Lots of crazy stories where they've come into their own full resolution. And, we're helping share this with others. It's like mirror neuron effect. Mm-hmm. So that is a platform for my Embracing Health membership where people can join and work with me live.
Beautiful. Awesome. And you have videos on EFT and things like this as well, right?
So we have awesome free videos on EFT that you can do, whether it's
I'll link that
pain,
specific video
anxiety.
in the show notes because I think there's one of those on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah,
we have like a free EFT mini course that people go. So you're learning not only like, what is this circuitry? How do I work with this? But like a really great, easy tool that's pretty universally, the way I use it, it's pretty universally going to like open you to begin to perceive in higher ways, feel better, feel lighter, and really heal.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.